it's time for IP in the news. And what is our topic du jour?
Well, it's about Russia.
Why not?
It was one that you chose, so go for it.
Russia is totally in the news. So we have an article here from the Washington Post that actually highlights the purported importance of intellectual property, and it's entitled, "Russia Says Its Business Can Steal Patents from Anyone in Unfriendly Countries." So since this is a show about intellectual property, of course, this immediately came to our attention because it's a little bit unusual for a country to sort of fight sanctions with withdrawing intellectual property rights.
Unless you realize that intellectual property can be worth a lot of money.
Absolutely.
And that's why they're doing it.
And in fact, Russia has been a frequent intellectual property violator. They're actually on the U.S. Trade Representative's countries to watch, priority watch list for IP abusers. And so they're actually number 2 behind China on that list. So it's questionable what effect that they're,
So I got to ask you, since McDonald's is pulling out of Russia,
yes,
is somebody else in Russia now going to start a McDonald's?
Well,
and use the name McDonald's and sell whatever they want to sell? Borscht?
Well,
vodka?
I actually read the article, and what the article said was that there are 850 McDonald's restaurants in Russia that they are suspending, temporarily. But the fact is that if Russia also revokes trademark rights in addition to patent rights, then they could literally operate as McDonald's restaurants in theory without paying the franchise fee. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if the McDonald's are, well, right now they're apparently not open. So I guess we're actually doing the Russian population a failure.
A failure?
No, we're actually doing them a favor by making them healthier, right? So
McDonald's is healthy if you eat the right thing.
So I don't know if this is in the long run, if this is going to be a real effective sanction, but what the heck. And
well, let's go to Richard's round.
Okay, well, why not do that? So it's time for Richard's Roundtable, and I'd like to ask our panelists what they have to say about this phenomena, and if you have any other questions about intellectual property, I'm here to answer them. So Toby, you're up first. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, from the movie perspective, Russia is always sort of the safe harbor of all the torrents and sort of illegal streaming / illegal downloading websites. So I feel like the violation of intellectual properties is not a new thing in their game. But yeah, I mean, I found it fascinating. I read this whole interesting book about AI and China, and how in China, the intellectual property protections are so low that everybody imitates each other right away. And so it creates this enormous field of competition. I don't know if that's going to be the case in Russia, because who knows how long the war will last. So somebody's saying, hey, I'll start up my own McDonald's. I'll pump in XYZ millions of dollars to actually be able to afford even a few restaurants. If the war is over in 2 weeks because somebody finally figures out that Putin should not be in power, then that was a failure of a startup.
Well, from your lips to God's ears, I hope this war ends tomorrow, for crying out loud.
Well, I've eaten in McDonald's in different countries, and it doesn't taste quite the same, for example, in Europe as it does in the US. True. And they have different menus too.
But it still tastes really good.
Well, it's if you're traveling and for some reason you get tired of the local food, there's always that McDonald's there that you can get a taste of home. But in Europe, they sell wine sometimes and beer at the McDonald's restaurants.
Oh, wow.
So can you just imagine that combination of a Big Mac and a beer. I don't know, but
you never had that when you were
I'd rather not.
I bet you had that in Europe. That's how you know.
That's how we know.
Anyway.
So, Dr. Emily Splickel, how are you? What was that? Spickle. Okay. So, Dr. Emily, tell us what your thoughts are.
Sure. So I actually have a question for you as far as the number of patents and trademarks per location. So I know the US is very much associated as this land of innovation and entrepreneurship. That's what kind of our founding fathers were really, this country was built around. Which country has the greatest number of patents and trademarks globally?
Well, that's a great question. And it's changed a lot over the years. Actually, in the US, China is the #1 filer of intellectual property behind the US. And part of that is
Behind the US? So US.
US is forward, yeah. And
US is #1, China's #2.
no, China's #1 and US is #2. And so the reason for this, part of the reason is that the Chinese government is paying its businesses to file intellectual property in the United States. So they're actually trying to encourage a large number of patents. And the other piece of that is Chinese patent and US patent are very different. So you need to keep in mind that a US patent might contain 5 inventions, and the way Chinese patent agents draft their applications, they would split that up into 5 different patents. So even though the numbers are off, sort of the amount of protection is still probably greater in the US, but yeah, they're #1 now. And
Are they?
yeah,
I thought
absolutely.
IBM was #1 for patents.
Yeah.
Well, that's the #1
Patents issue.
#1 company, right?
Okay.
So, but great question.
If I can share just something real quick on that also. So we have, Naboso has 5 trademarks in various countries where they have characters. So Japan, China, places like that. And we had to trademark what the common name for our product. So Naboso doesn't translate directly in Chinese. So we had to ask someone local, or actually quite a few people, what would they call our product, Naboso? And then we trademarked those characters. I just thought that was really interesting. And if you have any kind of insight on that as well, or you've heard of that.
Right. Well, absolutely. That's really important that you get it right in the local language if you're planning to market your product in the local language. So English is a bit ubiquitous in that it's pretty well spoken. So a lot of marks hold up pretty well internationally, but if you're going to market it in the local language, then you have to file your mark there. So.
And there are some funny stories about people that choose a word that means something nasty in another language. They don't realize it. That's a good point, though. Really smart.
Well, that's part of the fun of trademarks. So, so yeah, I mean, I think that's great. Aaliyah, what are your thoughts about all of this?
Yeah,
stuff?
it's interesting to see that, Russia or other countries can make this decision that can threaten other people's intellectual property. I think it goes to speak to, entrepreneurs to sort of be wary. It's, IP is something important, but you really need to establish different types of moats because, unless you're willing to, go down that litigation route and, you would know more about this than me and curious to hear your thoughts. It can be quite, a long process to enforce that IP. So curious what your advice would be for entrepreneurs that, maybe their IP has been threatened in a place like Russia or other places, what they should do if it's even if it's worth pursuing.
Right. Well, you got to, pick and choose your battles carefully. A lot depends on your budget. And most patents in Russia are really for life science companies. They protect pharmaceuticals there, less on software and consumer products. And so, you want to, if you're in a company that has weak intellectual property protections, you really have to rely as much as you can on, reputable agents and, strong, contracts. So I've never personally enforced a patent in Russia. I have in China and most other European countries. So I really can't speak personally to the enforcement system. But yeah, it's just, it ultimately is, if you can at least get something started and maybe work out a license agreement, you don't necessarily have to pay for a whole trial. And that principle applies across all enforcement of intellectual property. Very rarely do these cases actually go to trial.